Hey there, folks. The Scottsdale Travel Chick's sidekick here to present our ultimate guide to the Galapagos Islands. In this video, we'll tell you everything you need to know about organizing and taking a trip to the Galapagos. From how to get there, along with the costs, the best times to visit, comparison of cruising versus land-based tours, what you can expect to see when you're there, and more. We think this is the most comprehensive video you'll find on organizing a trip to the Galapagos. So let's get right into it. First up, just a bit of background on the Galapagos Islands. The Galapagos are a group of islands about 600 miles west of mainland Ecuador and are world-renowned for their unique and fearless wildlife, much of which was the inspiration for Charles Darwin's famous theory of evolution, published back in 1859. The Galapagos get their name from the giant tortoises, which were once prevalent across the islands. But unfortunately, since the island's discovery, these turtles have largely been killed off for their meat and oil trade over the centuries. The good news is that today, there are dedicated efforts to repopulate these turtles across the islands once again. Starting in the mid-1900s, the Galapagos Islands became more well-known and more popular as a wildlife and ecotourism destination, particularly once the Galapagos National Park was established in 1959. After that, UNESCO also recognized the islands as a World Heritage Site in 1978, and in 1986, 27,000 square miles of ocean surrounding the islands was declared a marine reserve, second in size only to the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. The Galapagos consist of 18 primary islands, but with only 5 inhabited, and the entire population of the Galapagos totals less than 40,000 full-time residents. Of those 5 inhabited islands, the islands of Santa Cruz and Isabela are the most visited. Santa Cruz is the most populated and the hub of Galapagos tours and cruises, but the island of Isabella actually has more sights to see and activities to experience. But whether you're planning to experience the Galapagos by small cruise ship or a land-based adventure, many of your activities will be on or around one of these 2 islands, along with the possibility of the island of San Cristobal. One more fun fact before we get into the details of planning your trip: the United States built the very first airport on the islands as part of a military base to protect the western approaches of the Panama Canal in the 1930s. Now, let's get into a few details around planning your trip to the Galapagos. Regardless of what type of trip you take, visiting the Galapagos is all about nature and experiencing wildlife, up close and personal. And there are 2 ways to do that, either by a multi-day sailing or simply staying on the islands and taking tours each day. I'll talk more about each of these options later in the video, but no matter which you choose, be prepared for an active vacation with lots of walking and snorkeling. In terms of any tour package, also be aware that very few will actually include flights from the mainland to the Galapagos or the Galapagos Park entry fee. Flights from the Ecuador mainland to the Galapagos will cost anywhere from $200 to $500. And the Galapagos Park entry fee will cost you $200 per person. Note that this park fee used to only be $100, so you'll see that in many other videos. In addition to these larger fees, you'll also pay a $20 per person transit control card at the mainland airport before leaving for the Galapagos.
Buy this pass, this costs you $20, and that's your first step.
Both this transit card fee and the Galapagos Park entry fee are required to be paid in cash and in US dollars. It's important to note that key point. Another interesting point to note is that virtually all activities and excursions across all the islands in the Galapagos require a certified guide and are limited to a maximum of 16 persons per guide. So the good news is you'll never have a large group of people together at one time, but the bad news is you're not able to go most places on your own. In terms of cruising the islands, the national park also restricts the size of all boats to a maximum of 100 passengers per vessel. However, the vast majority of boats sailing the Galapagos have less than 15 cabins and carry less than 30 guests. As I mentioned, the only way to get to the Galapagos is by airplane, and all flights to the Galapagos must originate from inside Ecuador. The flight time from Quito, Ecuador's capital, is about 2 hours direct, but perhaps 2/3 of the flights to the Galapagos also have a stopover in the port city of Guayaquil, so be sure to take note of that when you book your flights. Most all flights arrive to Santa Cruz Island, as this is where most all cruise ships depart. Both Avianca and Lantam operate flights to the islands. As I mentioned above, almost all flights arrive to Santa Cruz Island, which in reality is Baltra Island, a small island just to the north of the main island of Santa Cruz. Upon arriving, everyone will transit through a checkpoint where you'll need to pay that Galapagos National Park fee of $200 per person I mentioned earlier. After transiting the checkpoint, you'll either take an onward flight to Isabella or San Cristobal Islands, or you'll take a short shuttle bus ride and a ferry ride over the Itabaca Channel to the main island of Santa Cruz. And this is where most cruise yachts depart from as well. All right, so this is the ferry across this channel to the main island of Santa Cruz. If you're doing a land-based package, you have two options to transit between the islands, either by very small prop planes seating less than 10 persons, or by high-speed ferry boats seating up to about 40 people. The planes take less than 45 minutes between the islands.
Awesome.
While the boats take about 2 to 2.5 hours. Of course, the planes are more expensive, costing about $150 each way, while the boat ride costs about $30 each way. For both flights and boats, there are either morning or afternoon options. Now, let's come back to those two options you have for exploring the Galapagos, either a cruise or a land-based adventure. Each is a different way of seeing the islands, but you'll see the same type of stuff either way. Interestingly, tourist statistics show visits to the Galapagos are about evenly split between people taking a cruise and people doing a land-based package. Are you following me? We did a land-based tour between the two primary islands of Isabella and Santa Cruz, but the choice is up to you. All right. But to help you make your decision, we've organized a short pro and con list for each. First up, a Galapagos cruise. There are about 85 boats and yachts touring the Galapagos. The Galapagos National Park limits all those boats to a maximum capacity of 50 cabins or 100 passengers, but the vast majority of boats transiting the island sleep less than 30 passengers, as I mentioned previously. First point on cruise packages are they are much more expensive than the land-based packages, typically around $1,000 per night for a couple. Of course, there's a range around this number, from slightly less to much, much more. There are some exceptions, but a cruise ship cabin tends to be much smaller than a typical hotel room on the islands. Plus, you'll be limited in your dining and drinking options to whatever is on board. But you'll get to see more remote locations and uninhabited islands compared to a land-based package. And your experience will be more intimate and more personal, and you'll have a better chance to see whales compared to a land-based package. A land-based package. As the majority of excursions and sites are on or around the two main islands of Isabella and Santa Cruz, it's not hard to have a great experience simply by staying on the islands and booking daily tour packages. If you take a land-based package, you'll also get to stay in a hotel of your choosing with more space and amenities, such as pools, hot tubs, and lots of dining at your schedule. You'll also have the benefit of staying on the islands at night, which allows you to go shopping, explore various beaches, and try out multiple dining and nightlife options in the evenings. You can also make your own schedule for the trip and move at your own pace, scheduling in a free or slow day if you prefer. However, your tour packages will be limited to where you can get to within an hour or two boat ride, and once you're there, they may be more crowded as everyone will be going on the same sites but in different boats, but roughly at the same time. But most of the time, your tour group will be by itself. Now, let's talk about the best times to visit. The Galapagos basically has two seasons, dry and wet. The wet season is roughly from December to May, and the dry season is from June to November. Average temperatures hover in the low 70s during the dry season and edge up into the high 70s or low 80s during the wet season. Even though the islands are on the equator, the water temperature is surprisingly cool compared to Mexico or other destinations you might be familiar with.
What? Jump in.
It is really cold.
During the dry season, the water ranges around 72 Fahrenheit and rises to around 77 Fahrenheit during the wet season. This means that some people may prefer wetsuits for their water activities, and note that some tours either provide these as included or charge extra, depending on what you book. I hope all this gives you an idea of how you'd like to organize your trip. But for specifics, you'll have to do your own research. However, to get started, we've provided you some valuable links below the video on land-based versus boat tour providers. Take a look. Now, after all that important logistics stuff, let's finally talk about all the things you can expect to see and do in the Galapagos. But before I do, just a quick shout out that if you're enjoying this video, please give us a thumbs up, maybe make a comment too, or better yet, forward this to all of your friends. And please consider subscribing to our channel to receive more fun, informative travel videos just like this one. As we already discussed, there are a multitude of tour packages you can choose from and islands you can visit. But I think it's fair to generalize that most activities are centered around turtles, marine life, or a bit on volcanoes. But marine life is certainly the biggie. And what's most unique about the wildlife in the Galapagos is they are not afraid of human interaction. With that in mind, I'll summarize below some of the top attractions to see between the two main islands of Santa Cruz and Isabela. But note, this is not a complete list of every site on every island. However, it's pretty safe to say these will be the type of adventures you'll have regardless of what tour package you book or what island you'll visit. We'll move fast here and just show you a bit of the awesome marine encounters we had, and if you want to see more content related to animal interactions, check out our other video exploring the diverse wildlife of the Galapagos. First up is the main island of Santa Cruz. Most everyone will arrive to this island in order to start their Galapagos adventure, and it has the largest town by far on the islands, Puerto Ayora. Having said all this, this island is not the one with the most sights to see. Nonetheless, almost everyone spends some time here. On the island of Santa Cruz, the top things to do are the Charles Darwin Research Station. It's also the headquarters of the Galapagos National Park Service. Here, you'll get a great overview of the history of the Galapagos turtles, as well as the current efforts being made to repopulate them back across the islands. And you'll see the turtles, from little tiny ones to big ones more than 100 years old. Highland tours and lava tunnels are also a popular tour, and during these tours you'll see some unique flora as well as tortoises in their local environment, not to mention those lava tunnels. The Santa Fe Island excursion was one of the best excursions we took during our visit, with the water being super clear, and we got to interact with dozens of sea lions for more than an hour. Highly recommend this one. Finally, there are the North Seymour Island and Bartholomew Island day trips. Each of these are long days and more expensive tours, typically 10 to 12 hours and more than $250 a person. Our opinion for these is you're better off going to Isabella or San Cristobal Islands and taking shorter trips from there. Around and nearby the town of Puerto Aurora, there are some things you can do on your own without a guide. In terms of sights and beaches, it's nice to walk the primary street closest to the waterfront, as there are a couple of nice parks, and the fishing pier and fishing market, where you can watch daily catch being processed and pelicans getting their free meals. Additionally, there are 2 beaches close to town where you can explore on your own without a national park guide. Tortuga Bay is the top site you can do without a guide on this island. It's a 1.5-mile walk from town leading to a beautiful beach where turtles, pelicans, and blue heron are common. You'll also likely see sharks and iguanas in the waters here too. This beach is free to visit, but you will need to register at the entrance and start your hike before 3 p.m. Punta Estrada Beach and La Grita's Gorge is another top option. Here you've got a great beach along with a small slot canyon filled with crystal clear water, ideal for snorkeling. Lastly, for evening dinner plans if you're staying on the island, we'd highly recommend trying something along Los Quiscos Street at least once while you're there. Located along Charles Binford Street, one section of this road is a pedestrian-only zone filled with restaurants lining both sides and tables out in the middle. Cheap and simple food, but delicious and great place to socialize. Now, let's move to the things to do on Isabella Island, which is the largest island in the Galapagos, larger than all the other islands combined, and they say this island is shaped like a seahorse. What do you think? It's the result of 6 large volcanoes here, all merging into a single landmass over centuries. And if you're doing a land-based tour, you will certainly stay in Puerto Villamil. Located on the southeast tip of the island, it's the only tourist town here. On this island, the top things to do are the Las Tintoreras tour. And on this tour, as the name suggests, you'll visit an area where white-tipped sharks come to rest. You'll do some snorkeling nearby, maybe get a chance to see sea lions and penguins in the bay. But the big attraction here is swimming through Shark Alley. We got to swim over the top of 50 white-tipped sharks. Just a little freaky, huh? Another big tour is Los Tunnels, or the Channels. This is another great tour where you'll visit an area of lava rock channels with bridges and caves.
Look! Oh, there's a bunch.
Oh.
And during the visit, you'll snorkel with many big turtles and maybe some rays. We saw at least 5 turtles and also got to swim with some sea lions on this outing as well. And they also take you by a big outcropping in the middle of the ocean called Union Rock. There's a bunch of boobies and other birds and seals hanging around. Back on land, the primary activity is a hike to a large wall built by inmates of an infamous prison colony back in the 1950s. Along the way here, you'll see deserted beaches, dozens and dozens of iguanas, sea lions, and if you're lucky, see some giant tortoises out in their wild environment. But our pro tip here is to do this hike actually on a bicycle, as it's quite long at almost 6 miles round trip. This is the Wall of Tears ahead of us. This hike is often partnered with a short visit to a tortoise breeding center nearby. Also on land, there are a number of tours centered around the volcanoes on Isabella, particularly Sierra Negra and Chico volcanoes. Fun fact, Sierra Negra is actually quite active, with its last eruption only in 2018. There are probably another dozen excursions to consider on Isabella Island, but I think you get the idea here, right? They're all pretty awesome. In terms of things to do in the evening, the town here is quite small, but there are some nice beach bars and dining options along the short beach road, as well as the small town square. It's a nice little town to explore, actually. And just check out this beautiful sunset along this long, walkable beach. And one last little fun point. The Pink Iguana Bar along the beach road has a fun iguana hotel where you can check out hundreds of baby iguanas just hanging around. And with that, my friends, I'll bring this video to a close. We hope you enjoyed our ultimate guide to the Galapagos. Did we miss any of your favorites? Or do you have a secret tip you'd like to share with others? Then please let us know in the comments section below. And please consider subscribing to our channel for more fun, informative travel videos just like this one.
Until next time, see you later.